Hi, everyone, and welcome to MoneyChat 101. Today, we are going to have a Money Chat with Katelyn Fischer. She is the Director of Business at the Athletics Department of the University of Pittsburgh. Thank you, Katelyn, for accepting this invitation to chat with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Melissa. I graduated from Marymount University almost a decade ago, but I majored in finance and accounting. So a lot of my background is in that. I went on to public accounting for a few years, and then I made my way into where I am today, which is the athletics business office. Because of my background, I was really well prepared in college and then after to have a good financial foundation, because money was just always top of mind for me. And when I got into college athletics and started working with some other athletes, I realized that not everybody had that kind of privilege, because I think from a young age, you're either told you're either good at math or you're not. And when you are told you're not good at math or you feel like you're not good at math, you run away from anything that has to do with numbers or math, which in turn kind of scares you away from dealing with your finances too, because people just automatically think there's a lot of math or there's a lot of numbers and money, which there are. But I am someone of the belief that you can really, if you get the basics, you will become more confident. So anybody can figure out the basics of, financial literacy and managing your money. It's just about overcoming that fear. And since, like I said, I had the privilege of just having this background from, even in high school, I knew I really liked math and I really liked money. So I had, that passion for it, that I wanted to share it with others who maybe were a little bit afraid of, tackling some of their money problems. And then I realized how, starting in college, starting with young people who are just getting into this financial journey, it's only going to help them benefit when they're, in their full-time jobs and having to pay bills and having a regular income. So building this foundation and these fundamentals when you're in college, when you maybe don't have a lot of money, is only going to help you as you get older.
So what tips or recommendations can you give students to start that financial planning?
Yeah, absolutely. So step number one, I think, would be trying to figure out how to set a budget. And with that, there's there's some things you have to do beforehand. So you need to understand your spend. So understand, where is your money actually going? And that starts before you can even set a budget. You need to know, how much money am I really spending going out to eat, or how much money am I really spending on clothing or books or anything like that. So start with tracking your spend for, 30 to 60 days, figuring it out, where is your money actually going? And then once you have a good understanding, that's when you set a budget and you try to figure out, okay, I am spending way too much money going out to eat. So I want to rein that in a little bit, reel that in. So I'm going to set a budget, a realistic budget. If, typically I'm spending $100 a month, but I feel like I can maybe bring myself down to $50 a month, set that budget, and then try and stick to it. There's several different ways that you can stick to it, whether it's, using the envelope method, which is, taking cash out of the bank, saying you only want to spend $50, going out to eat, putting that in an envelope. And then every time you go out to eat, you use that money. And once it's gone, it's gone. You don't take from any other funding source. So that's a really hardcore way to stick to a budget. But you can also have apps like Mint. I highly recommend that for especially young people who are trying to get into budgeting. It's a free app, and you can it'll alert you when you're getting close to your spending limit, just so that it'll keep it front of mind. And then another thing is to set goals. So if you want to build up your emergency fund, keep that front of mind, because then it's going to, remind you, okay, why don't I maybe want to go out to eat and spend $100? Or, it just helps you stick to your budget, because you're thinking, okay, this may be a no now, but it could mean that's a yes later to some of my goals.
But what about students who say, well, I don't have a lot of money to start with. I would like to obviously learn how to save it, but also how to grow it or how to find more alternative streams of income. Do you have any tips or recommendations for that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Melissa. And I get that a lot, especially from college students, because like you said, you may not have a lot of income coming in. And you have to kind of find the balance between you want, I mean, I'm still a proponent of treating yourself. This doesn't mean that you can't go out to eat or that you can't buy clothes. Setting a budget is going to help you do that and stay within, your means, but then also see where there's maybe gaps where you can take some of that extra money and invest it or put it into an emergency fund. You mentioned side hustles too. So finding other ways to bring in money, highly recommend that for college students too, because there are so many skills that you could have that you can offer. What if you're really good at social media or editing film or even photography? There are always people that are looking for people who specialize in those areas and are willing to pay some money, even if it's something like babysitting. Find some ways to make some extra cash. There's also ways that you can do it from home too, whether it's taking surveys or using apps. I know you've used these apps before, where you take a picture of your receipt and it'll give you money. It's Ibotta or Fetch or Rakuten. These are all apps that you're not going to make a lot of money from it, but you can use it to capture some of the activities, the spend that you're already doing. So that's why budgeting is so important, though, is so that you can find where can I maybe lower my spend in certain areas, and instead of spending $100 on going out to eat, I'll spend 50, and then you use that 50 for something more productive, whether it's investing or saving or your emergency fund.
And what about investing? I know this word and this world intimidates people. So how can people start learning about those things and start losing that fear or thinking this is not for me, or I'm not going to be able to understand it?
There are definitely some like beginner apps out there if you want to get started into investing. And I think investing is kind of that hot and sexy term where people know, like, oh, I want to get into the stock market because I know I can make a lot of money, and you definitely can. But especially when you're starting off, when you don't have a lot of discretionary income to just lose, keep in mind that the stock market goes up and down. So it is a risk. And I encourage people, only put in the money that you're willing to lose, because if you buy a stock for $100 and then the next day it drops all the way down to $5, you decide to sell, you're going to get $5 back and you will have lost $95. But if you're in it for the long term and you want to see how stocks, go up and down, one day it may be down, that $100 stock may be down to $5, but the next day it could be up to 50, and then the next day it could be up to 150. So some apps I like to encourage beginners to use one is called Acorns, where you don't get to choose individual stocks, but there's a small fee for it, but you essentially connect your credit card or your debit card to the app anytime that you make a purchase. So say you make a purchase for $5.50, it'll take that 50 cents. It'll charge your card $6, take that extra 50 cents and invest it for you. And you can also change kind of your risk level in that app, and it'll do it for you, and you just kind of leave it and forget it. There's also an app, Robinhood, where you can buy individual stocks, and there's a bunch of apps out there too. I like Robinhood because it gives you a sign up bonus. So if you use a friend's referral code, they'll get a free stock and you get a free stock. And that's actually where you can, buy individual stocks, you can sell individual stocks, you can choose what you want, but again, it's all your money going into it. And if the stock market fluctuates, you decide to sell, you can either have a gain or you can have a loss. So I encourage people just to put in something that you're willing to maybe set it, forget it, maybe you'll lose it, maybe you'll log back in 30 days and you'll have a gain. And if you decide to sell it, you'll have to pay taxes on that. But and then there's just I would encourage, especially once you get a full-time job and you have maybe some extra income, to put into an individual retirement account or a 401k, 403b, especially if your company has a match. What I tell people, regardless if you don't learn anything else, just take away, always try and get the full match from the employee. So from your employer, if your employer is going to match up to to 8% of whatever you put into your 401k, make sure you're at least putting in 8%, because if not, you're leaving some free money on the table. So if you don't remember anything else, match what your employer is willing to put in.
And what are some common pitfalls or difficulties that you see the most in college students when they're trying to start with this process?
Yeah, well, number one, definitely not setting a budget and not knowing where your money's going. I think people would be surprised to know how much money they actually spend either going out to eat or with subscriptions or spending on clothes or spending on coffee, and not realizing how much that actually adds up. So that's definitely number one. Probably another one is not realizing how important your credit is. So if you maybe have a credit card, but you're only paying the minimum and not realizing that if you have a balance at the end of the month after your statement is due, you're going to be charged income on that. Or if you're not paying the minimum at all, that's going to hurt your credit score, down the line. And those things stay on your credit for up to 7 years. So not realizing that credit can definitely hurt you if you're not using it wisely. And then the flip side, not realizing that it can really help you too. So if you can get a credit card when you're in college, and start earning, rewards for what you spend, but also reflecting a good credit history. So that means paying everything on time, paying your balances off, keeping a low balance, not opening up, a lot of different cards. That's going to help you start building your credit score when you're in college. And then when you get out and you want to maybe get a loan for a new car or for a house, or even sometimes landlords, when you're renting an apartment, will check your credit history. That's going to pay off, and it's going to show lenders that you're a dependable buyer. So that, and then lastly, setting a budget, finding that money you have left over, and finding the balance between your emergency fund, which is so important even when you're young, just in case any unbudgeted expenses come up. So even if it's just $100, or even you're putting, $10 a month, or something really small, having that fund set aside for anything that does come up, so that you don't have to dip into your budget that you've already, carefully calculated. Not investing when you're young too. So a lot of people wait right when they get that first big paycheck. Instead of putting it into an investment account, they'll spend it, but not realizing that the power of time is really just going to work for you. So if you start investing when you're, 25, that's going to help you more than if you aren't going to start investing until you're 30 or 35, because that's 5 to 10 years that your money could have just sat there and grow, and had some growth for you, well, without you even realizing it.
And do you have any recommendation for percentages? I know people talk about the 50, 30, 20 rule. Some other people extend it to 70, 20, 10. Do you have a preference or a recommendation as to like how much money to set for each category?
I don't have any in particular. What I try to tell people is try to limit the big three as much as you can. So that's housing. So, have a roommate if that works for you, that you can split the costs with, or instead of having, a 3-bedroom house, if it's only you, maybe get something a little smaller. So that's where a lot of your money is going to go to. A car too. Like, I'm not saying you can't have a really nice car, but if you're trying to figure out how to kind of limit some of your spend, realizing that a car is something to get you from point A to point B. So you may not need the nicest one, you just need something to get you there. And whether that's, something that you can pay in cash, or something that has smaller payments, or even if you live in an area that has good public transportation, maybe you don't even need a car. And then lastly, limiting food. How much do you do take out in restaurants? There's a lot more money to be saved when you are cooking your meals in and you're going to the grocery store. It may be a lot more upfront, but when you break down the cost of the amount of meals that you're going to get for going to the grocery store versus going out to eat, especially with rising inflation costs, it's just going to help you save money incrementally over, a smaller period of time. But then when you extrapolate that over the full year, you'll really save a lot of money.
Thank you so very much for all these great insights you've given us, for all this advice. I know there's a lot of information out there and there's a lot to take in, but the important thing, I guess, the takeaway is start, right? Start soon, start early, start understanding the concepts, start applying the concepts in your life. We got to start somewhere. And that's why I hope that this resource and this conversation helps Marymount students, but really any college student, new grad, or young adult that is out there trying to figure out how to set themselves up for success in their financial journey. So thank you so much. And if you have any final recommendations or any final tips for our audience,
Like you said, just get started. Start with a friend, start with a buddy, find somebody that can hold you accountable, but that you can actually do this with, because it will be challenging. It will be something hard to get started with, but just keeping, like you said, your goals front of mind, realizing, you're not trying to limit yourself to where you're not enjoying your life, but you're trying to, set maybe some longer term goals where maybe it's owning a house or buying a car or something like that. So realizing how you can really just start to manage these basics, and that's going to help you pay off in the long run.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So this was Katelyn Fischer, Director of Business Services at the Athletics Department of the University of Pittsburgh. Thank you so much for being with us today, and best of luck in your future endeavors. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.